Right, welcome everybody. Welcome Bill, you and me tonight, and we're on page 68. And we have been strolling through the inventories. We're at the bottom of page 68, and tonight we're going to talk about the sex/harms inventory. And the format of this meeting is for the next hour or so, Bill and I snorkel through the big book, back and forth. We'll give you some meanings of words. We'll look at a little bit of history. And yeah, we'll just see where the spirit takes us tonight. Bill, if you won't mind kicking us off and reading. Thanks.
Thank you, Nadia. Yeah, that's interesting. Now about sex. That's where we're starting together. I put in my book, I changed the word from now about sex to now about thinking. Many of us need an overhauling there. Isn't that amazing? Okay, here we go. Now about sex. Many of us needed an overhauling there. But above all, we tried to be sensible on this question. It's so easy to get way off track. Here we find human opinions running to extremes, absurd extremes perhaps. One set of voices cry that sex is a lust of our lower nature, a base necessity of procreation. Then we have the voices who cry for sex and more sex, who bewail the institution of marriage, who think that most of the troubles of the race are traceable to sex causes. They think we do not have enough of it or that it isn't the right kind. They see its significance everywhere. One school would allow man no flavor for his fare, and the other would have us all on a straight pepper diet. We want to stay out of this controversy. We do not want to be the arbiter of anyone's sex conduct. We all have sex problems. We'd hardly be human if we didn't. What can we do about them? That's a long chapter. I'm going to have you talk first. I don't know, Rob, if you put anything in there like a straight pepper diet or you have anything from the 30s in your memorabilia. If not, I'm going to look up a couple terms while Nadia talks, right?
Thanks, Bill. So yeah, like Bill said, he's lined out the word sex, and it can be thinking. I did this harms inventory on God. Okay, but that's so we can really change this word for quite a bit. But what Bill's also talking about here is lust, love, relationships. Okay, so we're going to look at the relationships that we've had, and many of us need an overhauling. Bill, you're going to go look for some phrases. I did the same because you know what? I spent some time in this as preparation because I love you guys and I love this work and I love the privilege that we get to do this, to get people excited about this book. And I've also learned that coming in prepared shows my love for you guys and shows my love and respect for this program. So I spent some time here and I was like, Nadia, you have plenty old ideas around words. Like I've said, I always think I know exactly what these words mean, but I went and looked at them. Overhauling is where you take a part to examine carefully so that every part should work as it was designed. Well, I can tell you something. My parts did not work like they were designed. I was an animal out there. I was an absolute animal out there. I either withheld or too much, or I just don't think there was much sobriety ever around this kind of experience. But like it says here, it's so easy to get way off track. Let's remember, we're on a fact-finding, fact-facing mission here. We try to be sensible about this. One set of voices cry that sex is a lust of our lower nature. So that would be religion has quite a staunch outlook on some religions have quite a staunch outlook on sex. And then to also be mindful that during the time of this book being written, there were two very prominent psychologists, Carl Jung, a great contributor to our program, and a divine tool in us coming to life and to where we're at today. And then Freud was also a very prominent psychologist. And as you know, Freud saw sex in everything. So Bill is just identifying the different thought streams that are out there around sex. And then, Bill, do you want to jump in about straight pepper diet? I love this one. I had a completely different idea about what it meant. Go for it.
Which one are you talking about? I started with off track. And it means a couple things. If we get way off track here, it's a term, one of the terms which we're not using is legalized betting, but it says a phrase that means someone is not making good progress and may be in danger of falling. So what I was thinking about, we're all adults here, were they talking about someone masturbating when they were 13 years old under the cover at their parents' house thinking that God's watching them and send them to hell? Are we talking about voyeurism, exhibitionism, infidelity, pornography? What are we talking about here? We're taking a searching and fearless moral inventory, and we're examining here, we are considering the common manifestations of self. The three areas of my life that I look at that show me that I'm consumed with self-centered rather than God-centered, rather than other-centered. The first thing that they talk about, the number one offender, which we spent a lot of time on, was resentment. As soon as I take issue with something you say, I'll have a good friend say, sounds like wah, 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 wah to me, which means self is coming out of my mouth. Is that right, my good friend here? Okay, so having said that, the next thing that happens is I get afraid. It doesn't always look like afraid. It doesn't always look like fear, but I can identify it as such because all of a sudden there's people conspiring and I may not even have a resentment and connection with them. Now, what am I looking for? Am I looking to change the way I feel at less than my ideal? I'm going to coin that rhyme, Rob. I like that. Am I trying to change the way I feel at less than my ideal? Do I want to change the way I feel at someone else's expense? Do I want to drop below the standard that I'm going to set for myself? Because if I'm writing this inventory, have I seen where infidelity, inconsideration has destroyed my relationships? Me committing an act of adultery makes me think that my wife is an adulteress. What's happening is I'm building a prison inside of my head. And this is the one area we don't say every time we're resentful, we punch someone in the face, or every time we're afraid, we grab them around the throat. But usually, this is manifestation of what's going on in my mind that is acted out in the physical realm in some nature, whether I'm pouring something in this poison or trying to give something away that someone doesn't want, or being dishonest about it. So we're going to get real here, but we're not going to. I mean, I don't know, sometimes some of us do an inventory and say, holy moly, I could have saved hundreds of people a lot of pain, but I'm trying to satisfy something that's insatiable, just like the allergy produced by the first drink. And I don't know why that is, but it is. So it's a big one. And this is one of the warnings, as well as with the resentment and the four-step inventory, where it gives us a caveat that if our behavior in this area continues to harm others, and I may be getting ahead of myself only because I saw the movie instead of reading the book. But the fact of the matter here is it's real important, but it's not to be dirtied. Some people are real, like I sponsor a guy who comes from a certain community where they don't even have electricity. So infidelity is really, they get shunned from their community if they're caught in any type of situation that violates the 622 rules that they have. He might have an inventory where he has been with two women his entire life at 50 years. You get some people that, were in burlesque shows and doing whatever they were doing, male go-go dancers, all that nonsense, where certain things don't even faze them. And remember, this is conduct that we're going to look at that bothers me, not you. There are some people that certain things that we would be appalled at is natural in their, how do you say it, in their culture. You see some things where in Africa, not South Africa, Nadia, not to put you out there, where they don't look at a woman's boobs as something, oh my God, did you see what we saw? That's part of their tribal customs where they walk around with things around their necks, but no one's ashamed of that because it's not a shame-based behavior. So we've been given a lot of information in this area. We've attached a lot of stigma to it. And boy, oh boy, I want to go, 13 years old, see a little Playboy magazine and hide from God and my mom and look at it and say, oh my God, what's this? In other atmospheres or platforms, people say, put that away and look at the Popular Mechanics magazine because big engines turn me on. All right, is that good enough about that?
Bill, I also want to say to you, thank you so much that you touched on the shame around the subject. although I didn't know Bill W. personally, we do get to meet these guys in the Fellowship of the Spirit. I do think that he was quite astute in leaving this inventory for last. He's got us into inventory thinking. He's got us swallowing some chunks of truth about ourselves, looking from the prosecuting attorney to the defense attorney. He's got us into some really uncomfortable places through this inventory process, turning that mirror on ourselves, looking in the dark valleys. And now he knows that for most of us, this is filled with shame, filled with guilt, filled with family secrets. Thanks, Bill. Can I read for you? All right. So here we go. What can we do about them? Here are the instructions. We reviewed our own, we're on page 69. Come on, guys. Don't tell me God doesn't have the sense of humor. It's on page 69 and we have the instructions to our sex inventory. Here we go. We're in the second paragraph. We reviewed our own conduct over the years past. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate? Whom had we hurt? Did we unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? Where were we at fault? What could we have done instead? We got this all down on paper and looked at it. All down on paper, that's the third time that we get an instruction that this has to go on paper. Gen Zs, we love you, not in the notebook, not in the laptop, not on the phone. Paper, black and white, white and black, whichever way you want it. And another thing, it says here, where were we at fault? Not, let's look at my part. That's a big book. We're in a big book study and we speak big book here. Where were we at fault? Over to you, Bill Swan.
I was always confused. I thought the straight pepper meant very rigid, but it means just the opposite. It means you can do whatever you want, whenever you want, wherever you want, with whoever you want. And if you've got an opinion about it, you can come along too. And then you got other people that say, guess what? This is only, you shouldn't even have pleasure when you do it. We're surprised you do. It's for procreation only, and that's its only intended purpose. Probably the reason it's so pleasurable is because we're basically lazy as a animal, or whatever you want to call us, is human beings are. And if there wasn't a good pleasure, how many times are you going to sit there and waste all that energy only to have a kid come out and pay for the next 18 years? And maybe if they go to college and doctor school, that's a 25-year sentence. If there wasn't a pleasure the way it is most of us probably wouldn't have been born. But nonetheless, here we go. So we're reviewing our conduct, like she said, over years past. Where had we been selfish? Where did I not care whether or not it pleased you or not? If it inconvenienced you, if you were asleep at 3 o'clock in the morning and I decided because you're living under my roof and I'm paying the bills, it may be time for you to participate in your rent. I mean, it depends. It depends on how sick in this area you are and how blocked from God. Some of us have done some stuff that we're keeping in a secret that we don't want to tell anyone because we're really embarrassed, ashamed, and it's just, the book talks about it, right? That we keep certain things inside of ourselves that if they don't come out, we hung on to the worst items in stock. If it's got a name, we didn't invent it. If I did it, sometimes I wish I didn't. And then we have the others who things happened to them very early in life that all of a sudden they thought was normal, till they either got caught or exposed repeating that behavior and found out not only was it not normal, it could have been criminal, and someone might want to kill you over that if it were done to their children or their spouse or their sister. We're dealing with big stuff where people aren't real well. In fact, another book I read, the one of them said that's an area where no matter what, it's like pouring coal into your lap. And if someone catches you messing around with their wife, they're not going to be forgiving no matter what you pay. It's a real powerful instinct to drive some of us to prison and to the gates of death, because we've stepped out of line there. And some people just aren't as understanding as some of us. They're not on quite a straight pepper diet. Okay. Did we unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? What does that mean? I remember when I get twisted from resentment. and my wife had maybe a poor body image, and she was pregnant, she was getting big, and she has some stretch marks. And if I wanted to retaliate, you certainly don't want to punch a pregnant woman. So what I would do is gawk intentionally at another hard body or fine body bikini girl over there in Florida, knowing that my wife was watching. I don't say that because I'm proud of that. I say it because that's what I did. That was one of the provocations of jealousy or bitterness. The suspicion is when I got to take a phone call in the other room or walk out in the garage and be real quiet when I'm getting a call, and that does not represent my normal phone call etiquette. It's because now I'm letting them be suspicious and I leave or I don't come home at night. Look at how inconsiderate we have been in all these areas. Some could be blamed on drunkenness. Some of this stuff is done sober in between drinks. And unfortunately, I'm sorry to say, a lot of this is done in the fellowship of AA after we're sober. And just as harmful, just as painful. And guess what the good news is? If you keep it up, you get to get thirsty. So not only will you know, we'll know too. Okay, Nadia, that's what I got to say.
Well, thank you so much for bringing that up, because it's in this fellowship that I have seen two things, two gods with a small g, a small capital, small g, because we get to meet the capital letter G, God, in these pages. That small God, I've seen two people, oh, well, not two people, sorry, I've seen two gods bring people down in this program, and myself included: money and sex. And it says here that we are not the arbiter of anyone's sex conduct. I've also heard some watered down messages in these rooms where they say no dating in the first year. Sorry, hold on. What does the book say? The book says we do not judge anybody's conduct. We don't have any, we have no opinion. May date, may not date, get divorced, don't get divorced. What we do is we're armed with the facts. And our whole department shouts and we have a solution. So we share our experience. That's what we do. There's no hard and fast rules here. And I love what we're about to launch into, where we start speaking about a sane and sound ideal. And this is so awesome, because the inventory process is a ramp up to amends. But Bill knows that we can't pause this stuff, right? So he's saying in this process of doing our sex inventory, we get to pray for a sane and sound ideal, because we're going to be, some of us are still married, some of us have just started dating, some of us were dating. We're not all just going to, we're not all single, because that, like I said, those were one of the gods that took me out of this program the first time. So Bill gives us an opportunity while we're in inventory to pray for a sane ideal, the way we can show up in a relationship, because we're seeing the harms. So we can actually get some results right away. Go ahead, Bill.
So that the people out there in YouTube land don't think that our minds are in the gutter all the time. In the first edition of the book, Alcoholics Anonymous, this part of the page did not fall on page 68, 69, or 70. It kind of got there. I'm wondering if when we got a hold of it and printed the third or fourth edition or second edition, we weren't the ones who were twisted. Nonetheless, it's not to take it away and say, oh, look, it's on page 69, and we all laugh because it's taboo. Also, let's take a look before I forget. I had something in the side of my, what do we call that, column of my book. Judgment has to be attached to this. In other words, sometimes I look at someone and say, oh my God, he's so ugly, or he must be good and bad, or he must have an awful lot of money to get something like that. That's all a formation of my ideals of what brings two people together. I don't look at the emotion. I don't look at the commitment. I don't look at the attraction of a personality interest. I'm so shallow. And just in the pursuit, sometimes it not only did, here's where the damage is caused too if no one else is involved. I'm never satisfied. I always need variety. The relationships all end because I make a commitment of fidelity that I just can't keep or don't want to keep. And it hurt, and it leaves a lot of wreckage. But what happens is it starts to change me. And we've talked about it. It's hard to form because it says we're going to ask God to help us mold a sane and sound ideal. And we're going to use what we found is objectionable as the new basis for an unobjectionable sex ideal. And if I'm watching stuff on the internet that I don't want no one to see me watching, while at the same time I'm trying to form a sane and sound ideal. It's hard to pick a mate that's kind of like regular, like me, older, and the teenage years are over. If I'm watching someone in the movie getting violated by 5 or 6 guys eating I got to get that shit out of my life. That's just for the record. I told my sponsor once, when I watch that stuff on the internet, my conversation with the females in AA changes. He said, let's start at the top. When you watch that garbage on the internet, your conversation with God changes. This is real stuff. And although we're adults and I know no one does that, it's the biggest industry in the world. We're not alone, but we don't talk about it because it's almost taboo. I don't want you to think that, guess what? When I get lonely, or I justify it by saying, well, at least I'm leaving the group people alone. It's no commitment. I'm poisoning my mind, which is effectively poisoning my spirit. And it tells us when the spiritual, the beginning of this step is about this, when the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally, and that's part of my mind, and physically. I'm not being driven by the stuff was done. And maybe when this sickness that I've harbored inside of me and pursued is quieted, and I go to God, then someone comes along and I learn the true meaning of compatibility, of communion, of relationship, of looking at someone for who and what they are, rather than how and what they look like, and how and what they'll make me look like. And I'm real distorted, you know. I asked my sponsor, when am I going to get a good girl? And he said, you had one about 40 years ago. You don't attract good women because of the way you live. I don't realize that the way I behave demonstrates where I'm at and what I'm drawing into my life. Now, that doesn't mean I become pious. I'm not a saint, but I'm not, and I'm also not as rigid as some of the people who come in and think, oh my God, there's different, in different platforms, I guess there's different levels of sin. Some send you to purgatory, some send you to hell, and some send you beyond hell. I'm not here to beat anyone up if they cheated on their wife. We understand that. Some of it's brought about by drunkenness. Some of it's brought about by marriages that just seem to be over and you don't know how to get out, or you don't want to violate some religious rule. That's what we're talking. We don't want to be the judge. People are going to tell you some stuff in their fifth step if you stick around here, that you might have to go to God and say, forgive me for even listening to that. But guess what? It's a sacred on solid, on holy ground experience. So we're going to be protected. But people went from watching certain things to all of a sudden they've got snuff movies out. That's where people are murdered on camera, and it's real. It depends on how sick and how far down that hole we go. And some of us get real dirty, especially with some of the other chemicals that are mixed when I just either can't get a drink or like the effect produced by adding that chemical to the drink. We got to be prepared for that. This is big stuff, and it's real important. Because if you tell me something that you're harboring that's causing you a lot of shame, and I act like I'm shocked or look at you like you're dirty or want to move away from you after you tell me that, I haven't fit myself to be a maximum service to God or the people about me. Nadia, I don't know why we got off on that tirade. And if you want to erase all that, you can, but it just came out.
I am so glad that you did, Bill. I am so glad, because there's two things that you brought up there that is so powerful. Is the longer you stick around in this fellowship and this program, you get to sponsor and you get to hear step fives. It is the most incredible experience to watch the light come on in someone's eyes after a step five. And two, we forget, and we hear in those step fives, those sacred, long talks, things that we've forgotten, or maybe we've hidden in the dark crannies of our own minds. And the second thing that you said there, Bill, that I just want to go back to you. You said when the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. What a powerful promise. And that's on page 64. That's a real promise. It's a real promise. It's on page 64. It's the last paragraph. It's about the middle in that paragraph. And I just want to share some experience here with you. When I first came into this program, I was literally frozen from my shoulders to about my jawline here. I'd been it was 18 months in this program sitting, and I was in immense pain. I was suicidal and I was in immense physical pain. I had injections in my, anyway, the list goes on and on. Many, 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 many thousands of rands, which is our currency in South Africa, scans, sonars, x-rays. I'm beyond human aid, guys. I'm beyond human aid, right? And I remember after my step 5, when we started reading step 6 and I did the step 7 prayer, my sponsor looked at me. I couldn't move my neck for 18 months. I operated like this. And I remember she looked over and she said, "How's your neck?" I remember, let me back up. When she read, I told her how much pain I was in. She was like, "Just wait, it'll go away." And I was like, "Yeah, this chick knows nothing. She knows nothing. Yeah, but you don't understand. But you don't, that alky speak." And she looked up at me and she said to me, it was after the step 5, and we went step 6 and 7. And I said, how's your neck, Nadia? And anyway, I just stick around. That's all I ask for anybody who's new in here tonight, who hasn't taken the hand of someone and done the 12 steps as outlined in this weird old book with its weird English and its stanky white pages, and it should be in a secondhand bookstore. I beg you, do yourself a favor. You've got nothing to lose. You go through these steps really quickly. So, yeah, Bill, thank you for that stark reminder of that powerful promise. All right, we're on page 69, and we're going to read the third paragraph on that page. In this way, we tried to shape a sane and sound ideal for our future sex life. In what way? By doing the column 1, we review our conduct. In column 2, we ask ourselves all those questions. We subjected each relation in the past or current or even future. You can even try this for your future relationship. If you're sitting here and you would like a second chance at a marriage because you stuffed the last one up, and she's disappeared and she don't want you coming near her, you've got a restraining order, but through this process you're straightening out and you're having a psychic change and you're helping others and you've realized you're one of God's kids and you would like a shot at a second chance, you could even review your future ideal by subjecting it to this test. Was it, will it, is it selfish or not? We ask God, here's a prayer, here's our sex prayer. We ask God to mold our ideals, God created us. So he's going to create our future partner or our new partner or our current partner and help us. This is a spoiler, guys. Sorry, spoiler alert. We ask God to help us live up to them. So this sane and sound ideal, when I did it the first time, I thought it was a wish list to my genie in the sky. Only for it to turn out that it was actually the list that I had to live up to. I had to be financially self-supporting. I had to be kind to old people. I had to be generous. I had to be good to my kids. I had to be loving to my family. We remembered always that our sex powers, remember what Bill and I told you right in the beginning, our job as people who take you through this work is to connect you to a power greater than yourself. One of the powers that we're acknowledging here is our sex powers. It is God-given. So it's not to be used lightly or selfishly, nor to be despised and loathed. And we're talking to everybody here tonight. We're talking to our sex and love addicts who have the obsession of the mind and the allergy. Once you've got one page open on your browser, you've got 50 going on, and it's 3 days later and you've blacked out and you haven't eaten and your curtains are still drawn, or you're of the kind that you despise these powers and you don't let anybody come near you. That is still selfish behavior. We ask God, guys. We don't even have to do much. We just have to ask that higher power. Over to you, Bill.
Absolutely great. And I looked at it initially, like you said, but something just kind of spoke to me and I highlighted it. So maybe this is an instruction for the conduct that I have down on paper, and it's asking a simple question. We subjected each relation, because I'll tell you what, if I'm in pursuit today, it might never be construed as selfish, right? I'm trying to satisfy something where all of a sudden my my morality does not come into play and say, you know what, that 31-year-old thinks you're all that. Let's say no and go to your sponsor and see if it's a good idea. However, if I subject each relation in the past to this simple question, was it selfish or not? If we know that self is the root of the trouble, and I answer yes in that area, I look at all the paper and all the behavior, the pursuit, the manipulation, what I promised or avoided to get some end. And if I see that I check that off as a yes, that relation was selfish, then I know when that behavior starts to come, that thinking starts to come, I'm heading back into self. It's a great example. And I looked up the word ideal. And even though it says, you know, we don't claim we claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. It is a concept leading to perfection, an ideal is, and it says not readily to be achieved. In other words, it's the goal. I'm probably never going to get there, but it would be the goal to not cheat on my wife if I ever got another one, to not provoke jealousy, suspicion, bitterness, to respect if she says I have a headache, to really believe that she does, even though the last one seemed to have a headache for about 7 years. I should have taken her to a doctor and gotten a lobotomy. The reality is to treat people like independent agents, intelligent agents, God's spearheads, just like myself. And usually when we come here, we're so steeped in self that I don't consider anyone else's feelings or personhood separate from my own. I want what I want when I want it. That's a common statement we hear in AA. And I usually do what I have to get it. And then I'm all sore when they leave. Or when the sheriff comes over with a restraining order, I'm asked to leave my house and someone comes onto my job and says, you know what, if you treat my daughter like that one more time, and guess what? Some people don't even warn us. Some of us are found in a dumpster somewhere. I know we're getting real eccentric here, but I'm telling you, this is a powerful instinct. I take meetings into prison. I went to another orientation. There are people that have killed people over someone patting someone on the rear end or just saying that they might like to do something. Pride gets in the way here. And this is not necessarily all alcoholics, and we are an extreme example of the human condition. When I get threatened or jealous or insecure, it's not like I'm going to call my mom and say I'm afraid. What happens is I take matters into my own hands, just like in A Few Good Men, and someone gets hurt.
Any life run on self-will, right? All right, back on page 69. Welcome to those who've just joined us. We're on 69 and we're on the second last paragraph. Whatever our ideal turns out to be, we must be willing to grow toward it. We must be willing to make amends where we have done harm, provided that we do not bring about still more harm in so doing. In other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem. In meditation, we ask God what we should do about each specific matter. The right answer will come if we want it. What a powerful promise. The right answer will come. God alone can judge our sex situation. Counsel with persons is desirable, but we let God be the final judge. We realize that some people are as fanatical about sex as others are loose. We avoid hysterical thinking or advice. Page 70, second paragraph. Supposedly we fall short of the chosen ideal and stumble. Now, this is the warning that Bill was talking about. There's 3 warnings in this book, and I'm going to go sniff around Nana. I have to remember where they are. I know it's a step 5 if you don't do step 5. And this one, and I can't think of the other one, Rob, maybe you can help me out, that the book warns us if we do not behave in a certain way or do a certain action, we are sure to drink again. So if you have anything that you like to really make a bright mark or like a red warning pen, here we go. Does this mean we are going to get drunk? Some people tell us so, but this is only a half truth. It depends on us and our motives. If we are sorry for what we have done and have the honest desire to let God take us to better things, we believe we will be forgiven and will have learned our lesson. If we are not sorry and our conduct continues to harm others, we are quite sure to drink. We're not theorizing. They're not playing around yet, guys. These are facts out of their experience, their hard-won experience. Those 100 or 87, whatever number it was, those that got sober, stayed sober, died sober, did this work, shoulder to shoulder, toe, boots to the ground. This is their hard-won experience. Bill, over to you.
And as I said, that kind of reiterates what I said. This is the one area where it's more action than it is just thinking. When I'm afraid, it takes place in my mind. When I get resentful, until I act on it, it's taking place in my mind. But it's talking about my conduct harming others. That means there's an interaction, there's a behavior. How long do you think you're going to stay sober when someone shows up to your Sunday dinner, knocks on the door, and tells your wife that you're responsible for her distended belly as she's ready to give birth to your child? That causes problems, right? That can really mess up a marriage. Or people that are paying child support. It's embarrassing, it's humiliating, it's harmful. Then we come in here and think, okay, well, we're not drinking. I'm lonely. I don't know how to relate to people. And what happens is, in the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I know it's no one on this meeting or listening to this recording on YouTube, but there are some very sick, vulnerable, lonely, pining hearts in the fellowship that are willing to give something that you're looking for in the promise of what you offer. If you make a promise and you don't intend to keep it, that's what they're talking about here, because then I'm acting out my behavior in a way that's harmful to someone else, mentally, morally, physically, emotionally, and most importantly, spiritually. And there's a price to pay. One of our predecessors said, it's hard to go to God's house for dinner when you're hurting his kids. It would be hard to go to Rob's house if he invited me over for dinner if I've been smacking his kids around on the parking lot or talking bad about him or trying to do things with me in the dark that I tell him, don't tell your dad. It's hard to go to his house and be comfortable. So what happens is I essentially, by my behavior, by my diabolicalness, and I'm looking at it in a negative vein, because obviously I'm not coming in here and say, oh my God, I got married and God blessed us with a child. How did that happen? Was it a star in the east? No, Bill Swan, you commingled with your wife and you had a baby, an expression of love. Big difference. But it's talking about the vileness, the conduct of the heart, the mind, and then the actions. And it calls it an imperious urge. And lastly, I want to say about the last paragraph, because we've turned the page. Our sex powers are God-given. We reproduce with them. They do give pleasure. They're not to be despised, which means, oh my God, I hate that I have this instinct. I either can't satisfy it or can't get no one to help me satisfy it. Or loathed, which is disgusted. I can't believe I'm in trouble again. I made the front page of the Boston Globe for gross sexual imposition. What? Why can't I just go to work and not deviate and drive up and down 34th Street? Why do I have to take in the scenery? Every time I do, I get, you know what I'm saying? So we really got to look at this. There's some seedy stuff that takes place in some of us, and I'm speaking for me, that I'm not even aware of. I told my sponsor this the other day, Nadia, we're on the YouTube here. I said, Ralph, I was a predator. That's a big statement. I don't mean that I snuck into your house and snuck into your daughter's room. What I'm saying is if people didn't have the mental acuity of me, but they have physical desires like me, I would engage in that. This stuff I had to look at, but guess what the good news is? Just like Marty talks about in his talk, and it's public, it's on record, that him being molested as a child was the greatest asset he has when he's dealing with other people than me being predatory. If I own it and share it with someone else, it has to be beneficial, because a lot of us don't want to tell someone, you know what? I know she said no. I thought she meant maybe. I had my way and she didn't like it. And I lived in terror that the police were coming because I knew that I overstepped my boundary. Under the influence of alcohol or not, this is real stuff and it's a warning. We are quite sure to drink again. This ain't a theory. This is facts out of our experience. And guess what? When they wrote this, the fellowship was less than 4 years old. Most of the alcoholics were less than 2 years sober. They had enough evidence in this area to make a bold statement like that, that this ain't no theory. We're not guessing this is going to happen. We know it will. So it's real important. And the people from the Second Chance House said that I'm on fire. I think that means that I'm real intense or bipolar at the moment, but I'm having a good time. I hope I don't offend anyone. Did we lose her, Rob? Now I'll have to go back to being the soft-spoken member of this partnership. Okay.
We'll
Sum
talk
up
on
about, is she back? Okay. To sum up about sex, we earnestly pray for the right ideal, for guidance in each questionable situation, for sanity, and for the strength to do the right thing. If sex is very troublesome, and I look at that as two ways. Either it's getting me a lot of trouble or troublesome, I just can't get none. Guess what? There's a solution for both. We throw ourselves the harder into helping others. We think of their needs. She's back, and work for them. This takes us out of ourselves. It quiets the imperious urge when to yield would mean heartache. I'm going to hurt myself or someone else. I had an affair. I never had one before because I had never been married before. I was married maybe 3 years at the time. And a little of a sudden, I got very interested in this other person other than my wife. And it couldn't go on because she was married too. And what happened, it was the first time all of a sudden I'm laying there in bed with my wife and I don't want to be bothered with her, not because I didn't love her anymore, but because something new and exciting and risque and dangerous took place. And I'll tell you what, when the girl told me, look, it's over, and I didn't realize that was a habit for her, that I was just the flavor of the month because my ego is such that I was the only one, a special one. And all of a sudden, I'm showing up on her job on my way to work, and people from her work are coming and saying, you can't come here, leave her alone. Oh, what happened? It's like I developed this intense emotional attachment that was really tied around the strongest knot in the world, as my sponsor said, is when two pubic hairs tie. And it doesn't matter what the definition of the relationship is, whether it's a wife, a girlfriend, a side girl, whatever you guys call it. This just for some reason just seems to be an area that dominated my life, drunk or sober, and probably a lot of other people when we look at it. There's a lot of feelings that go involved. There's a lot of attachment. There's a lot of investment. And even in the other book that defines the union, talks about the two become one flesh. What if that's a spiritual principle that when I engage physically and become one flesh with someone, that something about me then gets attached and vice versa? Just saying. I don't know. This is probably an in-depth big book study today. The good news is I can erase this tape as if it never happened, Rob. That's at your discretion. Nadja, are you back? Save me from myself.
I'm back in, Bill. You're on a roll tonight. I think we can hang out here a little bit longer. We might just make the end of this chapter. Let's see. There's two beautiful instructions in this tiny little paragraph here. There's a daily prayer. So to sum up about sex, let's just forget about that. We earnestly pray for the right ideal. So we ask God, like this could be just a daily prayer. Let's forget about sex and all the resentments and the inventories and the fear and everything. This could be a really simple little prayer for starting our day. God, I'm asking for the right ideal. I ask for guidance in each questionable situation. I ask for sanity and I ask for grace to do the right thing. There's just a nice little daily prayer for you. And the second instruction is, if sex is troublesome, if Netflix has become troublesome, shopping, spending, like Bill said, in this fellowship, we've got a lot of romantic type, a lot of new people coming in. We've got these big rock stars with their names all over flyers. It can be quite tempting and attractive. If it becomes troublesome, throw yourself that much harder into helping others. Not an odd text here or there. Throw yourself into helping others. That is sure to quiet the horny urge, guys and girls. If we have been thorough,
About our personal inventory, we have written down a lot. We have listed and analyzed our resentments. We have begun to comprehend their futility, I will die, useless, and fatality. Sorry, futility is the uselessness of these resentments, and fatality is I will die from these things. Resentments destroy more alcoholics than anything else. We have commenced to see their terrible destructiveness. We've begun to learn tolerance, patience, and goodwill toward all men, even our enemies, for we look on them as sick people. Remember our sick man's prayer on page 67? We have listed the people we have hurt by our conduct and are willing to straighten out the past if we can. So if you're sitting with someone new across, you change all of these into questions. Have you written down a lot? Have you listed and analyzed your resentments? Have you begun to comprehend their futility and their fatality? Have you begun learning patience, tolerance? Just begun. Have you just started feeling these things? Have you listed, and are you willing? Are you willing to straighten out the past? Are you willing, newcomer? Are you willing, relapser? Are you willing? In this book, you read again and again that faith did for us what we could not do for ourselves. Remember that one of the promises of working step 9, the preamble you hear over and over at all the meetings, God will do for us what we could not do for ourselves. We hope, Bill and I and Rob, we hope that you are now convinced that God can remove whatever self-will has blocked you from him. If you have already made a decision and an inventory, step 3 and step 4 of your grosser handicaps, you've made a good beginning. That being so, you have swallowed and digested big chunks of truth about yourself. Let's go look, page 263. We haven't done a big book bounce all night. Let's do one. Let's go look, page 263, the third paragraph. Dr. Bob led me through all the steps. At the moral inventory, he brought up several of my bad personality traits. These are the big chunks of truth that we're talking about. So yeah, they are. They've been outlined for us. Nice and simple. If you got one of these, you probably got all of them. Such as selfishness, conceit, jealousy, carelessness, intolerance, ill temper, sarcasm, and resentments. Big chunks of truth. Over to you, Bill.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. You know, I looked up the word imperious, and sometimes I assume that I know what things mean. And I checked to make sure that this was the only standing definition before, during, and after. And here's what it says: assuming power or authority without justification, arrogant and domineering. Boys and girls, he was onto something here. You know what? And he probably talking to the men. And sometimes we may be able to be quite forceful. And if you go back to the 30s, where women were thought to be submissive and the man was the head of the household, they're really getting into maybe some forceful action here that I want, you're going to meet my demand. They're telling us, if this is from my understanding, my interpretation, if this is taking place in my sanctimonious, sacred matrimony, and I'm compelling my wife to do something she might not otherwise want to do, I'm in risk of getting in trouble. I better go out and get a new guy and help him. And not just emotionally or legally, spiritually. This may separate me from the power and put me in a position to drink. And here's where I came up with a theory. We went over with some people that were on here, not on this study. But when we came to at the end of how it works, where it says the 3 pertinent ideas, I'm pretty convinced by my own behavior and experience that I'm alcoholic and my life's a wreck. I'm also equally positive that no human power, because I've exhausted every one of them, could relieve it. But until I experience the grace of God, how can I be convinced? Because that's the next line after that, being convinced. How can I be convinced that God could and would have he were sought? I'm hoping. You guys said it happened for you, but it hasn't happened for me. And so what I said is, at the third pertinent idea, if I'm not convinced that God couldn't, if you haven't sold me on it enough yet for me to believe it's capable for me, The question becomes, am I willing to be convinced? Because if I am, I can move on and find out whether or not it's going to happen for me or not. And here's what it says. We hope you are now convinced. So even if I wasn't at that point of step 3, Rob, maybe now I am, because I can see that I can see things about myself that were separating me from this power that I could never see before. And that may be enough hope to say, guess what? If I can see that and rectify it and go to him to change it, I don't have to be like that the rest of my life. And lastly, I'll say this, because it's going to allude to it again in step 8. It says we have a list of people we have harmed, and we say, where do we get it from? Well, we did it when we took inventory. And here's what it says. We have listed the people we have hurt by our conduct and are willing to straighten out the past if we can. That's a preemptive step 8 direction right there. That's what it's telling us. Guess what? You got the list and you're willing, if possible, and not hurting other people. If you can make amends and make it right, you're going to do that. I'm afraid the top of my head's going to blow off, Nadja. I'm done for the day.
Man, on fire. Thanks, Rob. You can press stop recording. Thank you. Awesome, Bill. Thank you so much.